The one thing that actually claims the lives of new players more than anything else in 7 Days to Die is combat. So for this video, I'm going to be going over some of the most important tips to reduce the amount of deaths you face from combat in 7 Days to Die. This video is intended for new players, but advanced players might pick up some tips too. Let's jump in. This first tip is so fundamental that you can see it in play in every gameplay video I've ever made, and that is making use of painkillers. Things can turn pretty bad pretty quickly in 7 Days to Die, so you'll need to be able to fix a problem just as quickly. Painkillers can restore 40 health once the animation is finished playing, which is the only instant health item in the game. Every other medical item restores health at 2 per second, and food restores at 1 per second. So when you find painkillers, put them on your hotbar next to your primary weapon, so that when you get hit for a lot of damage and need to heal in a panic, you can just scroll once or press 2 and then eat the pills. Ideally, you want to try to avoid using your painkillers for healing after combat because it's a waste of their instant health ability. Better to have painkillers instant health when you need them than be stuck with first aid bandages when you need instant health. And do remember to drink some water afterwards. This tip might be an obvious one to some, but someone definitely needs to hear it, because whenever I play with new players, almost all of them make this mistake quite a bit. This tip is keep moving. I'm not sure why this happens. Perhaps people just get fixated on trying to aim their shots and they forget to use the other side of the keyboard. But regardless of why, standing still in this game will get you killed. If you just keep backpedaling while fighting, you will take a lot less hits, and taking a lot less hits means a lot less deaths. If you're someone who consistently dies in the first week of the game, this is probably what's off about your gameplay. So keep moving backwards, and additionally, if you're playing on faster run speed, try to put obstacles between you and the zombie, because they do not have a very smooth jump animation, so you can hop over a fence very smoothly, and then the zombie will have to slow down and then hop over the fence, which takes a slow animation and it'll give you a few seconds of stamina regeneration, which might just be what you need to finish that zombie off. The next tip is to remember local body damage, in particular headshot damage. Zombies take a lot more damage if you hit them in the head, which is probably obvious, but I can't stress enough how almost pointless hitting zombies anywhere else but the head can usually be. Unless you have a very specific leg dismemberment build going, always aim at the head, especially with melee weapons. You will waste a lot of stamina and take a lot more damage if you try and hit their bodies, especially if you end up playing on high difficulties. The biggest reason you want to aim for the head though is actually thanks to this next tip. Dismemberment and decapitation. Dismemberment is one of the most useful mechanics in 7 Days to Die. You can increase your dismemberment chance in a lot of ways, including finding higher damage weapons, taking perks that increase your damage. There are also a few specific perks that will increase your dismemberment in general, but one of the best ways is to increase your attributes. Doing so will just give you a boost to your dismemberment chance with all related weapons. The real magic happens when you combine dismemberment with the headshots from the last tip. If you do headshots, you do more damage, increasing dismemberment chance. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the human body, but if you dismember the head, it often leads to death, at least 50% of the time. Luckily for us, the zombies in 7 Days to Die always die when you take off their head. So combine headshots with dismemberment and save a lot of effort killing zombies. The next tip is very easy, and most experienced players should know this by now, but new players would have no real way of knowing this right off the bat, and that is get yourself some Preacher gloves. They increase your damage to zombies up to 60% at level 6. 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to prioritize wearing Preacher gloves in combat over any other armor gloves. There are a few scenarios where others are better, but for a surefire way of just increasing your overall effectiveness, Preacher gloves are the way to go. They are absolutely exceptional. The next tip is to make sure you are making use of your combat perks' secondary effects. Obviously, the damage perks increase your damage and reduce your stamina usage of weapons, and that is very useful. But be sure to utilize the bonus effects of each weapon's perk to get the full use of your guns and melee weapons. Spears get a slow effect, which is very useful against faster enemies like dogs and ferals. Rifles get combo damage, which means that chaining together kills makes your weapon do even more damage. Clubs have bonus knockdown chance with power attacks and deal bonus damage to knockdown enemies, making them very good at crowd control. Sledgehammers are all about knockdown chance and knocking down multiple enemies, making them even more crowd control focused. Shotguns get a stun that slows down enemies for up to 8 seconds, and you can do leg shots, triple movement speed by a further 30%. Strength weapons are exceptional for crowd control in general. Knuckles have increased stuns, the ability to remove infections, increased knockdown, and bonus dismemberment chance. Machine guns have stamina restoration on hitting enemies with bullets, which means that they're very good for running around and spraying and preying on horde knights instead of needing a base to survive. Knives get a slow and inflict bleed stacks, which cause damage over 20 seconds. Pistols get double damage every 4th shot. Now remember, you will need to invest in the perks for each of those weapons to get those bonuses for the most part, although the shotgun does have a stun. Regardless of the perk, it's just less powerful. So make sure you're using your weapons and the weapon perks for what they're best at. This next tip is all about height. In 2.0, zombies have better vertical reach than in previous updates. This means that you have to stand higher than 2 blocks to avoid being hit. You need to approximately stand on something like 2.5 blocks, but that's not particularly practical in the moment in general combat because you're not going to be able to specifically find blocks that tall or place blocks of that height. What is easy though instead is just doing 3 blocks or nerd pulling up 3 blocks. So when you have nowhere to run, try going up if you can. Get 3 blocks up and zombies can't hit you, leaving you free to shoot them or in some cases melee them. On the topic of placing blocks in combat, the next tip is to keep some wooden spikes on you. Wooden spikes will damage zombies that run through them. They're usually static base defenses, but there's nothing stopping you from keeping them on your hotbar and placing them in the path of zombies. This should be reserved as a bit of a last resort though, because you don't get XP for zombies killed on wooden spikes. But it's a very good equalizer for very powerful enemies like ferals, dogs, or other just large amounts of zombies. This last tip is all about armor. First, when you spawn in, always make sure you make the full set of primitive armor. It's going to cost you essentially nothing and gives you a good 30% damage resistance, so always get that. There is no reason to avoid it. Now, there are 3 classes of armor: light, medium, and heavy. If you use light armor at level 6 with 4 advanced plates and take the light armor perk all the way to rank 4, you will get roughly 73-ish damage resistance, which is very high for armor with essentially no downsides in terms of stealth, stamina, or speed. You can get a little bit more resistance if you go for the Preacher chest piece specifically. For medium armor, you don't need the perk at all. It doesn't really give you anything worthwhile in terms of boosts. With full level 6 armor and advanced plates, you can actually only get a few more % damage resistance compared to a well-built light armor build. But if you use full level 6 biker armor with advanced plates, you'll get nearly 83% damage resistance, which is pretty high for medium armor. Then for heavy armor, you can't use heavy armor plates, and the perk really isn't all that useful unless you're really bothered by the movement speed. The armor rating is still only a few % more than full biker armor though, with some pretty severe stamina penalties even with the perk. Heavy armor should really only be used for specific armor effects that you might want. It's not really worth the downsides since they have buffed plate armor so significantly. However, heavy armor still has its place earlier in the game before you have access to things like armor plates and spare points for light armor, and just general access to higher quality armors. Heavy armor can give you a cheap and easy way to have high damage resistance at the cost of movement speed and stamina. For all those reasons combined, I would recommend later on in the game that you switch to using full level 6 Preacher armor with the light armor perk and armor plates for the best balance of mobility, useful combat effects, and protection. But by no means does that mean it's the only good option. Probably just my favorite. If you found these tips helpful, why not check out my Essential Tips for 2.0 video popping up right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.